Okay, welcome to Functions Part 2. So what we're going to do now is focus on the value of a function. So right now we got to go through a little bit of some notation. What we've done so far, or also in the last semester, is evaluating things like this. So find the y value of negative 3x plus 4 when x is 4. So what we did here is we just plugged in x equals 4. We'd say y equals negative 3 times 4 plus 4. Okay? And so you get negative 12 plus 4, negative 8, and there you go. But now what we're going to do is introduce the new notation, which would look something like this. So instead of saying find the y value when x equals 4, we would say f of 4. And that's saying find y when x is 4. And so that would be negative 3 times 4 plus 4, which we already said was negative 8. So what we have here is this equation, which we now are going to replace the y. So replace y with, and here's our function notation, f of x. Alright, so let's go ahead and try another example. Oh, by the way, these are some other letters that we can use when doing functions. So what we've just used is f of x. Okay. And we can use big F, big G, little h, c. Okay, all of these are functions. So let's go down to this example here. So let's have f of x equals 3x minus 2. Again, this is exactly the same thing as this. So all we're doing is, instead of writing y, we write f of x. Now the reason we use this notation is, again, because I don't want to keep saying, hey, what's y when x is 3? I could just say f of 3. Now notice that you have x in these parentheses here and you have x right there. So basically what's inside the parentheses is what's going to replace the x. And so before I actually plug it in, I can write it like this. 3 times this would have been x minus 2. So 3x minus 2. But now instead of x, we now plug in 3. So we get 3 times 3 minus 2. Okay. And that would give us 9 minus 2, which is 7. And you go ahead and you do that for the other ones. So we'd have 3 times whatever's in those parentheses minus 2. So that's 3 times negative 1.5 minus 2. So if you go to your calculator, plug that in, you get negative 6.5. And if you do it one more time with 4/3, and what you're going to do is you're going to replace the x with 4/3. So that's 3 times 4/3 minus 2. And that's going to give us 2. Alright? So here's an example of when you're not just plugging in a number, when other things can happen. By the way, let's do this one real fast. What is f of k? Well, if you're starting to understand this, what we're doing is we're replacing whatever's inside, we're replacing the x with whatever's inside the parentheses. So this is going to be 3 times what would have been x squared minus the x. But again, now we're going to replace x with k. And there isn't much we can do with this, so its final answer would be 3k squared minus k. Alright, now we know how to do this one. So this says let x equal -2. So that's going to be 3 times -2 squared minus -2. Now I want to point out why I keep writing these parentheses. Like in the previous example, I did them first with parentheses and then I plugged them in. If you don't use parentheses around the thing you're substituting in, you may have issues with these double negatives. You may actually, you might not realize it's a double negative, or you might just forget to write the negative in there. But notice here that this is a double negative. So what we have is 3 times -2 squared, which is 4. Now that's a minus -2, which is a plus 2. So we got 12 plus 2, 14. And so f of -2 is 14. Now here, all this is saying is, whatever f of x is, multiply that by 5. So it's going to be 5 times, and whatever f of x is, which is 3x squared minus x. And then just distribute. Right? It would be just like distributing from last semester. So we get 15x squared minus 5x. Now this says replace the x with -x. Okay. So it's going to be 3 times, well, what would be in those parentheses, minus what's inside the parentheses. I write it like this first, because then I can go back and plug stuff in. So I have the format of the function down. All right, again, this would just be an x here. But now I'm going to plug in -x. And then evaluate. So what happens when you square a -x? It turns to a positive x squared. And here we have a double negative again, so that turns to plus x. And this one, negative f of x, basically says take whatever the function is, which my function is 3x squared minus x, and multiply it by a negative. So we get negative 3x squared plus x. Okay, now taking the same function, I don't want to change anything. So let's take, let me write it down first. Okay. Other things you can plug in. Now we can plug in numbers. I mean, I can use f of and then a smiley face. It's really no different. All I'm going to do is, where I would have an x, I'm going to use parentheses now, and then whatever's in these parentheses gets put in here. That's it. So what happens if I did something like this? F of x plus h. Well, I'm going to write it like this first, and then go back and plug in whatever's inside those parentheses. So x plus h. All right. And that's it. Now, sometimes the professor might want you to multiply this out. In this case, this would require foiling. Other times, you might just be able to leave it like this. For now, we'll leave it like this, and you'll be asked to work this out in class. So there you go. And if you have any questions, ask them tomorrow in class.